It's 1944. The Allies are pushing from the west. The Soviets are grinding from the east. Germany is losing on every front. And then a pilot looks up. What he sees isn't a propeller aircraft. It's not a biplane. It's not anything he's ever seen before. It's a jet, moving at over 500 miles an hour. Silent at first, then a shriek, and it's already gone. The Allied pilots who encountered these aircraft wrote one thing in their reports over and over: no time to engage. It was already past us. Germany lost World War II, but for a brief, terrifying window, the Luftwaffe was flying technology that the rest of the world wouldn't catch up to for a decade. Some of it was brilliant, some of it was insane, and some of it was so far ahead of its time that we're still copying it today. These are the 5 most extraordinary German aircraft of the Second World War. Let's start with the one that almost changed everything. The Messerschmitt 262, nicknamed the Schwalbe, the Swallow. First flight, July 1942. Operational combat, 1944. It was the world's first operational jet-powered fighter aircraft. And by any objective measure, it was terrifying. Top speed, 559 miles per hour. For context, the best Allied propeller fighters, the Spitfire, the Mustang, maxed out around 440. The Me-262 was faster than anything the Allies had in the sky, period. It carried 4 30mm autocannons. It was so fast that standard targeting systems were useless against it. Pilots had to fire using a calculated lead distance never before required in aerial combat. And it almost never got deployed. Hitler, in a catastrophic decision that military historians still argue about the Me-262 to be converted into a bomber, not a fighter. He wanted it to drop bombs on the Allied landings at Normandy. The aircraft wasn't designed for that. The conversion was slow. Entire months of potential deployment were lost. By the time it was finally unleashed as a fighter, Germany had fewer than 300 operational. The Allies had tens of thousands of aircraft. The Me-262 shot down over 500 Allied planes. Estimates suggest that if Germany had deployed it 18 months earlier, before Normandy, the air war over Europe looks completely different. It didn't win the war, but it invented modern aviation. Now we get weird. The Horten Ho 229. No cockpit bubble, no fuselage, no tail. Just a wing. A massive, bat-shaped flying wing that looks exactly like a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Because the B-2 is basically a copy of it. Designed by brothers Reimar and Walter Horten in the early 1940s, the Ho 229 was the world's first jet-powered flying wing. The concept was radical. By eliminating the fuselage entirely, you reduce drag to almost zero, which means you need less thrust, which means you go faster and further. First flight, December 1944. Powered by 2 Junkers Jumo 004 jet engines. Speed, 607 miles per hour. That's faster than early Cold War jets. In 1944. But here's where it gets into this territory. A Northrop Grumman analysis conducted in 2008 found that the Ho 229's shape and the mixture of carbon and wood used in its construction would have significantly reduced its radar cross-section. It would have appeared on Allied radar as an object roughly the size of a large bird. In 1944, before the word stealth existed. Was it intentional? The Horten brothers claimed they were just trying to reduce drag. But the materials, a specific combination of charcoal and glue bonded between plywood layers, are exactly what you'd choose if you were trying to absorb radar waves. Only one prototype survived. It's currently in storage at the Smithsonian. And if you look at it next to a B-2 bomber, the resemblance is not a coincidence. If this is the kind of rabbit hole you're into, hit subscribe. We go this deep every single week. The Me-262 was ahead of its time. The Ho 229 was decades ahead of its time. The Me-163 Comet was from a completely different timeline. It was a rocket-powered interceptor, not jet-powered. Rocket. The only rocket-powered fighter aircraft ever deployed in combat by any nation in history. Top speed, 620 miles per hour. Mach 0.84. So fast it entered compressibility, the leading edge of the sound barrier, where control surfaces stop responding normally. Pilots described the sensation as flying a bathtub down a waterfall. It was terrifying to Allied bombers. B-17 crews who encountered the comet reported that it closed on them from behind at over 300 miles per hour faster than they were flying. By the time a gunner could track it, it had already made its pass. But here's the thing. It was also terrifying to German pilots. The fuel. The comet ran on a hypergolic propellant called Seestoff and T-Stoff. These two chemicals were dangerously unstable. Contact between them caused instant, violent combustion. Pilots were issued special suits because if the fuel splashed on their skin, it would dissolve flesh in seconds. Landing was a nightmare. The comet had no landing gear. It landed on a retractable skid, belly down, at speeds that regularly shattered the aircraft. Hard landings could rupture the fuel tanks. Several pilots were killed in accidents with their own aircraft before they ever faced an enemy. Despite all this, the comet shot down at least 9 Allied aircraft, possibly more, in a plane that killed nearly as many German pilots as Allied ones. It was brilliant. It was insane, and nothing like it has been flown since.
The nose emblem is intact, sir. Good. Check the fuselage paint. Sir, the engine nozzle looks operational. Verified. What's the status of the cockpit?
By late 1944, Germany is running out of everything. Aluminum, fuel, trained pilots, time. So Heinkel engineers were handed the most absurd design brief in aviation history: build a jet fighter in 90 days. Use as little aluminum as possible. Make it simple enough that Hitler Youth with minimal training can fly it. The result was the Heinkel HE-162, the Salamander. Unofficially, the Volksjäger, the People's Fighter. The design is immediately striking. The jet engine sits on top of the fuselage, mounted above and behind the cockpit, like a backpack, because slinging it underneath would have required longer landing gear and more weight. The whole aircraft is primarily wood and glue. From design brief to first flight, 69 days. The fastest aircraft development program in history. And it flew. Top speed, 562 miles per hour. Comparable to the Me-262. More maneuverable. But the rush showed. Early versions had a critical flaw. The bonding agent used to glue the wooden components together wasn't fully cured. At high speeds and stress, wings would simply come off. The first public demonstration of the HE-162 ended when it crashed and killed its pilot in front of the Nazi high command. Over 800 were manufactured in underground factories using concentration camp labor. They were ready. Pilots were in training. And then the war ended. Most aviation historians believe the HE-162 never flew a confirmed air-to-air kill in combat. Some researchers dispute this. But the aircraft itself, a wooden jet fighter built in 69 days using teenagers as a pilot pool, remains one of the most extraordinary acts of pure engineering desperation in history. The fifth aircraft doesn't get talked about as much as the others, and that's a mistake. The Dornier Do-33-5 feel, the Arrow. And what makes it extraordinary isn't exotic fuel or a radical shape. It's a deceptively simple idea executed to perfection. 2 engines. One in the nose pulling, one in the tail pushing. A push-pull configuration called a centerline thrust arrangement. Why does that matter? Twin-engine aircraft of the era had their engines on the wings. If one engine failed, the remaining thrust was off-center, creating yaw, drag, and a difficult handling emergency. The Do-335 had both engines on the aircraft's centerline. Lose one engine, and you barely notice. The aircraft continues straight and level. The result: 474 miles per hour on propeller power alone. The fastest piston-engine aircraft of World War II. By a significant margin. Its contemporary, the American P-51D Mustang, topped out at 437. The Do-335 left it standing still. It also had an ejection seat, one of the earliest aircraft to feature one, because Dornier's engineers correctly identified that the rear propeller would turn any bailout into a very short, very violent experience without one. 22 were built. It never saw meaningful combat. Like everything in this list, it arrived just as Germany was collapsing. But test pilots from the US and UK who flew captured examples after the war were stunned. American evaluation reports describe it as the most impressive propeller aircraft they had ever flown. If Germany had produced it in 1942 instead of 1944, the air war over Europe becomes a different conversation entirely. 5 aircraft. 5 different approaches to the same desperate problem. How do you win a war you're already losing? The Me-262 proved jets could dominate the sky. The HO-229 invented stealth before radar defenses existed. The Comet pushed pilots to the edge of the sound barrier in a plane that wanted to kill them. The Salamander showed you could build a jet fighter in 69 days out of wood. And the Fiel was simply the fastest propeller aircraft ever built in combat conditions. Germany lost the war. But the engineers who designed these aircraft were immediately recruited by the United States, the Soviet Union, and Britain. The technology went everywhere. The next time you look at a B-2 stealth bomber flying over your city, you're looking at something that started in a workshop in 1943. Some ideas don't die with the side that invented them. They just change flags. If you want to know what other buried technology is still flying under new names, the next episode goes even deeper.
Keep your positions. The
I'll
craft
see you
is
there.
active. Everyone ready. Eyes on the ship. Status report. Is it hostile?